Could you pass the Americans with Disabilities Act in Washington today? My answer to that is absolutely not. We could never get that legislation passed today in the Congress of the United States. Never happened. We just had a point in time where we had a president of the United States, George H.W. Bush, who was strongly in favor of it. I think maybe I've always been kind of outraged by a sense of injustice. I was an anti-war protester on the Vietnam War. I worked on human rights issues. I was a lawyer that I represented poor people as a legal aid lawyer. So I represented people who couldn't afford a lawyer because they were getting stepped on all the time by the power structure. So I just always, I don't know why, something inside me. I guess we all have different motivations. We all have sort of different callings in this life, and that sort of was mine. And so I never really thought much about making a lot of money. I just thought more about public service and about changing things so that life would not be so hard on people who maybe didn't have a lot of money or a lot of power or had a physical impairment like my brother or my nephew. That's just what I wanted to do. I suppose because of my brother, first of all, I saw how he was discriminated against. Two things my brother said to me one time in his life that I've always remembered. One, he said, "I may be deaf, but I'm not dumb." They told him he could only be one of three things. He could be a shoe cobbler, a printer's assistant, or a baker. And my brother said, "I don't want to be any of those things." They said, "Well, okay, you're going to be a baker." So they made him a baker, even though he didn't want to be that. My brother said to me one time, he said, the only thing I know I can't do is here. I know I can't do that. Now, whatever else I might be able to do, I don't know until I try it.
The limitations that other people put on you, whether because of their own ignorance, is a very tragic phenomenon.
People ask me, could you pass the Americans with Disabilities Act in Washington today? My answer to that is absolutely not. We could never get that legislation passed today in the Congress of the United States. Never happened. We just had a point in time where we had a president of the United States, George H.W. Bush, who was strongly in favor of it. We had people in the Senate, people in the House, both Republicans and Democrats, who were for it. Everything just came together at that point in time. We had some outliers. We had some people absolutely opposed to it, but they kept getting fewer and fewer in number. That's the first thing. Secondly, yes, there are things I would change. First of all, I would have had some kind of a mandate in there for businesses to hire persons with disabilities. I would have been stronger on employment in the ADA than we were. The second change I would have made would have been something that I've attempted to do since that time, and that is focus on youth transition services for a young person with disabilities to transition to the workforce or to higher education. The problem has been the reluctance of the private sector to reach out and bring in persons with disabilities into their businesses. A lot of it has to do with human resources in these businesses. And I think there's been a lot of unfounded fear that if they hire someone with a disability, that they'll be a burden rather than an asset. But every time, and I can say this without any fear of contradiction, every time we have seen a business employ a person with a disability, and if they provide adequate training and some support, that person becomes one of their best employees. They become loyal, they never miss work, they become more productive. I've seen this happen. And yet businesses have been so reluctant to do this. Now, we've had some leaders in the business community that have done that. I speak of Randy Lewis and Walgreens, Doug Wasson, who was the CEO at that time of Walgreens, that have hired countless persons with disabilities, who basically told me that the places where they have persons with disabilities working is their most productive centers.
Wow, those are some incredible stories there. And I know I've heard from, my professional experience, if you hire a person with disabilities who is right for the environment, a good fit, the returns are higher and there's greater loyalty as well to the company or organization.
Absolutely. I think the other thing I tell the business sector now is, look, you have a training program, but maybe that training program does not fit for a person with a disability. You may have to think about changing your training program somewhat for a person with a disability. Secondly, you may have to make an accommodation on the job, but those are minor. They don't cost very much. And sometimes those modifications are even better for a person without a disability in the workplace. Mm-hmm. Once they do that, it's just sometimes they say, well, we tried to hire a person with a disability and they got in the training program and it didn't work. Well, but maybe the training program was not adaptable to a person with a disability. Maybe they needed to change their training program a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these days, a lot of jobs really don't need that physical component, right? And right. So if it's a good fit and if it matches with the interest of the person interviewing, then it really shouldn't be a problem.
There's two sides to this. One is the employer side that's reluctant to hire someone with a disability. They don't have an experience at it. They maybe are nervous about it. So there's that kind of reluctance on the employer side. There's a reluctance in the disability community also. Well, you say, well, why is that? Well, because a lot of times a person with a disability, maybe they tried for employment before, they were turned down, they've tried 2 or 3 times, they keep getting turned away. They don't find a welcoming atmosphere. They don't want to be pitied. They don't want to be patronized. They want employment as a job. So there's some reluctance on the part of persons in the disability community to put themselves forward. Employers have to let persons in the disability community know that they are welcome. They're welcome to come in and they will be treated like everybody else. They won't be patronized. They won't be pitied. If there's accommodations to be made, we'll make those accommodations. First and foremost, there has to be the step forward by the employer to let people know they will be welcome into their employment pool. Secondly, you got to go to the disability community and say, whatever your past experience has been, don't let that stop you. If you find someone out there that's reaching out, go towards it. Don't be afraid that perhaps you won't fit or that maybe you'll be turned away. Don't let that deter you.